what's up, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kenahan, and today we are recapping the 2025 Reese Senior Bowl week. We had the practices. I was in Mobile. I attended all three of the practices, Tuesday through Thursday. We had the game on Saturday, which I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit, but really, the practices are more important than the game itself. So we're going to talk about the practices a lot. I'm going to talk about who stood out to me while I was in Mobile. Who are some of the guys I talked to? What were they talking about in terms of meeting with teams and meeting with the Washington Commanders? And also, I also want to go over, of course, some good fits for Washington towards the end of this. So we'll get things started with some of the quarterbacks, and then we'll go into offense, defense, that type of stuff before going into, now that the Senior Bowl and all the All-Star games are wrapped up, who are some guys that are in the area of Washington's pick at number 29 that Washington could select? So let's just jump into it with the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks, if you were watching the live, I live streamed after on this channel after the first day of practice on Tuesday. I kind of held off on the next 2 days just so I could do more of a recap towards the end. But if you were watching on the first day, you know how I didn't really talk about the quarterbacks that much because I wanted them to wait until they could build more chemistry with the wide receivers since it's the first time throwing to them. But the quarterbacks in Mobile this week, Jaxson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Riley Leonard, and Dylan Gabriel kind of highlighted the top four quarterbacks. And then Seth Hannigan out of Memphis. You had Taylor Elgersma out of Laurier, I believe, a Canadian school. And then Tyler Shug out of Louisville. So out of these seven quarterbacks, you almost had Will Howard, but Will Howard ended up dropping out. So they had 8, but with these 7, I would say the guy who stood out the most was out of Louisville, Tyler Shug. I mean, he was probably the most consistent out of all 3 of the days. The game itself, he played well as well. But overall, I thought he had the best kind of week. It was not really a high bar, I would say, of the quarterbacks. No one really had a, oh, wow, outstanding performance throughout the week and in the game. But, I mean, yeah, I guess you could say he was the best. It was kind of the storyline more so, I would say, is there's going to be a lack of top quarterbacks in this draft. You have Cam Ward, you have Shedeur Sanders, who in their own rights are also not like the elite quarterback prospects we've seen in the past couple of years. But you look at the guys that attended the Senior Bowl, Jalen Milroe, Jaxson Dart, Riley Leonard. Those 3 were kind of, or mainly just Milroe and Dart, were kind of the main 2 that people were looking at in terms of they can boost their stock heavily in this week, and neither of them really did. Jalen Milroe, we'll start with him. It was a rough few practices for him. For first couple practices on Tuesday and on Wednesday, it was a struggle. He threw an interception on Wednesday. It was not good. And then on Thursday, it was better. It was more so kind of just to even out the other 2 practices, because if he had a bad practice on Thursday, it would have really turned into this guy's a stock down guy. So he had a bounce back day on Thursday, and then in the game itself, it was not pretty. So it was not wonderful stuff from Jalen Milroe. I would say it kind of hurt his stock more than helped it this week. But I mean, I still have to do deep dives on the quarterbacks. From what I saw from Milroe this week, though, it was just a lot of accuracy issues. Also some pocket presence stuff in the game itself, but a lot of just inconsistencies as a thrower, you could tell. And especially a week where the Senior Bowl, you're not going to have designed runs for Jalen Milroe, because we've seen that this entire season. We've seen that throughout Milroe's career. His like bread and butter is those designed runs as a quarterback and what he can do with those designed runs. But NFL coaches who coach these teams and coach these players throughout the week want to see other stuff from these players. And Milroe is not just the running stuff, though, because we know what he is as a runner. He's a great rushing quarterback. But NFL coaches and scouts wanted to see what he could do with his arm more. And this week, it wasn't entirely great, I would say. He had a couple of nice throws during Thursday's practice, but it was not wonderful. As for a guy like Jaxson Dart out of Ole Miss, Dart was someone who, I mean, has been getting so much hype this week. If you've been following the Senior Bowl, for some reason, Jaxson Dart has been, it's kind of like propaganda almost that has been circulating in terms of how well Dart played this week, because I mean, I saw it with my own eyes. It wasn't anything special from Jaxson Dart. It was kind of a lot of the same stuff I saw on film when watching him and Ole Miss's offense. He never really tested anything down the field. Even in the game, it wasn't anything too crazy. Like maybe boost his stock a little bit in the game itself, but nothing nothing to like push him into the first round, in my opinion. And some people are like, "Oh my goodness, Jaxson Dart, best quarterback in this class," and I just don't see it. I just don't see it right now. I don't really know what if we're watching the same thing. I don't know if we're watching the same practices, but Jaxson Dart to me did not perform like well enough to boost his stock. I wouldn't say he performed bad enough to hurt his stock a lot. I think he was kind of okay throughout the entire week. It wasn't anything new, good or bad. It was kind of just the same. So I thought Dart's stock kind of just should just stay the same. But I mean, there was a lot of hype throughout the week for Jaxson Dart, which I don't really understand. So I mean that was a little bit interesting, but yeah, for Dart, it was something that it was a week where he could have definitely improved his stock a lot more than he did. It was definitely a good opportunity for him to make himself a first round quarterback. But from what I've heard from like scouts and stuff, I know a lot of the media is saying, "Oh, he's going to be a first round guy." From a lot of the scouts and those type of guys, I mean, what I'm hearing is it wasn't anything special from him this week. I don't know behind closed doors with the interviews and all of that, how he performed there. Maybe that's part of the reason why some people are like, oh, this guy's going to go first round. He really impressed in the interviews. Maybe that's the reason, but there was nothing on the field throughout the week or during the game that showed to me this guy is worth taking a first round pick on and taking a massive chance on if you're a team. So, Dart, it was kind of up and down, nothing much pretty much from him. So, moving on to a guy like Riley Leonard. Leonard from the Mobile, Alabama area. He's like lived like 20 minutes away. So grew up 20 minutes away. So that was pretty cool from him. Kind of a homecoming for Riley Leonard. As far as his stuff, again, nothing too crazy one way or the other. It was just kind of, I mean, the same. It was kind of the same. It was a lot of underneath stuff for a lot of these quarterbacks. Nothing to hurt his draft stock a ton, but nothing really to help his draft stock. And I mean, that's pretty much all I'm going to say about the quarterback position in general. It was a lot of the same for these guys. Tyler Suggs was maybe the guy that improved his stock the most, but I still would think he's going to be a day 3 guy. So nothing really much else to say about this quarterback position. The two highlighters were Milroe and Dart, and neither of them impressed to what I hoped they would, or played up to what I hoped they would play up to. So that's the stuff on the quarterbacks. As far as the other offensive standouts, so I guess we'll just go position by position here. We'll start with running back. Some of the guys that stood out to me, Trevor Etienne out of Georgia was someone who I thought had a great week of practice. There was rumors that he was going to potentially leave after the second practice and not like finish out the week. Some of these defensive guys did do that, which I'll get to in a little bit. But it was great that Etienne not only stayed for the third practice, but participated in the game as well. I think Etienne is someone who could be like a third down receiving back. It was awesome to see what he could do in the one-on-one drills. I know kind of running backs are favored in those type of drills, and the offensive guys are kind of favored. But it was great to see what he could do. Great movement skills, great vision. I mean, as a Florida guy, I kind of hate to say it, but this is a guy I would take a chance on, and someone who I think improved a lot throughout the week. And in a stacked running back class, I think Etienne kind of made his name known, and people kind of realized, hey, this guy, he's got to be on our radar. We've got a bunch of these other running backs that are pretty good, but Etienne is someone who I think stood out this week. Another guy who stood out, kind of a more smaller school guy out of Delaware, Marcus Yarns. I thought Yarns, his contact balance throughout the week was great. I know it's a little bit misleading at times with these practices that are a lot more not full contact, so you don't really tackle and you kind of let the guy run past you, even if you're in position to tackle. But I still thought Marcus Yarns had a great week of practice on the American team. Some other guys that I know some of my other friends and colleagues liked, Brashard Smith out of SMU was someone who I know a lot of people were interested in. And then Woody Marks was someone that I thought had a pretty good week and then had a very good game itself as well. So Marks out of USC is kind of another one of those receiving backs. We had a lot of those guys in this kind of Senior Bowl class, but Marks is someone who I thought improved his stock a good amount. And I know a lot of people like the guy like Marshawn Lloyd, another running back out of USC who was at the Senior Bowl last year. And I wasn't a big Marshawn Lloyd guy throughout the process, but I'm kind of on the train with Woody Marks here, and I think Marks could be a solid rotational back in this league. And then Ollie Gordon is probably the last name I'm going to bring up here out of Oklahoma State. Gordon had a great game, and I thought, I mean, for the other running backs, I was surprised Gordon, who ran for I think 1,500 yards back in 2023, and then he had a down year in 2024. I thought Ollie Gordon had a very good Senior Bowl week, and someone who again, it's a very stacked running back class. I was kind of surprised that he entered instead of entering the transfer portal or something like that. But Gordon was someone that impressed me a lot throughout the week. So those were the running backs that kind of stood out. As far as the wide receivers, we'll start with the American team wide receivers. I'm going to start off with Jack Bech out of TCU. Bech was someone coming in that not a lot of people were thinking about in terms of being like a day two guy in the NFL. But I mean, this week there's going to be some crazy takes for Jack Bech moving forward, and I might be with those guys because Bech, he catches anything. He catches anything. This guy at I believe 6'1" or 6'2" can go up there and catch anything. He's every single day made an insane catch. It is awesome what he has been able to do with battling adversity throughout the past month and a half or so, and he went out there and was the best wide receiver on the field at the Senior Bowl. I keep on wanting to say Shrine Bowl for some reason. At the Senior Bowl, he was the best wide receiver all week long. There was not a doubt. If you ask anyone, it is Jack Bech. So it was awesome to see what Bech was able to do, and he delivered in the game as well. So I was very impressed with what I saw from Jack Bech, and someone who was not on my radar heading into the week, but is now on my radar now, and I'm excited to watch him in full depth as well. So Jack Bech was someone. And then a DMV guy, Ty Felton out of Maryland. So Felton is actually from Northern Virginia, so the DMV, and he went to Stonebridge, a very prestigious football school in Virginia. And I got a chance to talk with him. He was a very cool guy. He loves his DMV roots. And at Stonebridge, in case you don't know, Stonebridge, they ran the wing T offense. So the wing T offense basically run heavy. You've got 3 tight ends at times out there. You really don't utilize your wide receivers a ton unless they're kind of in the backfield playing more as a running back or they're out there blocking. So as a wide receiver, Felton had something to prove. And then he also had an injury in high school as well that kind of took him off a lot of teams and schools' radars. But he commits to Maryland. He sticks with Maryland. And it took him 4 years, but this season was one of the best yards after the catch receivers in the entire country. He led the country in receiving yards for about half the season. Felton is someone that I really like, and I think he had a pretty good week at the Senior Bowl, and I'm excited to see what's next for him because he's just a great guy. I got a chance to talk with him for about 5 minutes or so. He's a great guy, and I cannot say enough good things about him. So Felton is someone that I liked. Who else? Jalen Royals is, I know, a lot of people's kind of draft crush or one of my guys out of Utah State. I thought he had a pretty good week as well. And then in terms of the national offense, both Iowa State guys, Jaden Higgins, 6'4" or 6'3" out of Iowa State, and then Jalen Noel, more of your kind of slot guy who can who's like a smaller receiver but can create separation really well. Both of those guys had great weeks. Jaden Higgins, yeah, I am putting my name on the train now or whatever. I'm hopping on the train, the Jaden Higgins train. Jaden Higgins is one of my guys in this draft. I think he, at his size, 6'3", 210 or so pounds, what he can do, his ability to create separation, his movement skills was very impressive throughout the week. I had to watch. He was my very first watch after the first day of practice because I was so impressed with him. I went back to the hotel. I watched that guy. And it was awesome what I saw on tape. A lot of the same stuff I saw during the week. And it was a drill, the one-on-one drills when it's the wide receiver versus the DB. I thought Higgins impressed a ton, and especially for someone his size, not only could he win with the jump balls, contested catches. I believe his contested catch rate was like 58% or something, which is like in the top quartile in the country last season, or on PFF's metrics. So it was very impressive what Higgins can do. He can go up and catch the ball, but also he was winning routes with his releases. And at 6'3", 210, you don't see guys his size win with their release a lot. And it was someone that there's some route running stuff that I think he needs to work on. He has too much wasted movement at times, but overall, I thought I was very impressed with Jalen Higgins. I came away very impressed. That was a guy that I would take in the second round easily. So Higgins is someone that stood out to me. Pat Bryant out of Illinois was someone that I know a lot of people were looking to have a big week from him this week. And it started off kind of quiet, but Bryant throughout the week, I know the Thursday's practice and the game on Saturday, he had a big one as well. So Pat Bryant was someone that had a big week as the week went on. And then someone that my friend Josh Taylor brought up. You guys may know Josh Taylor if you're listening to this, but as a Commanders fan, but Kyle Williams out of Washington State was someone that impressed during the week, especially on the earlier days. I think there's still some things to work on for Williams, who was the one-on-one drills aren't great to kind of base guys off of, but a lot of wasted movement from him off the release. If you saw one rep against Azaria Thomas, the FSU cornerback, and it actually took Kyle Williams more than 2 seconds to get off the line of scrimmage, which he did it on himself, but it was fun watching these one-on-ones throughout the week. And Kyle Williams was someone that I thought was pretty impressive throughout the week as well. So that was the wide receiver position. Let's move on to tight end. I think the big name highlighting the tight end class was Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green. Fannin was someone, I don't think he played. Maybe he did play in the game. I didn't see him though. But Fannin was someone that he comes in as an undersized tight end. He's 6'3". He kind of is more of a bigger wide receiver, kind of like a Kyle Pitts-ish. Not as big as Kyle Pitts, or not as tall as Kyle Pitts, but more of a Kyle Pitts-ish in terms of how Bowling Green used him, more as a wide receiver on the outside than in a traditional tight end position. But Harold Fannin throughout the week did a very good job, especially as a blocker. There wasn't a ton from him in terms of as a pass catcher, but we've seen what he can do as a pass catcher at Bowling Green. He led all tight ends in receiving yards last season. Got snubbed for the best tight end in the country award, unfortunately. But Fannin was someone who impressed as a blocker this week. But I would say the biggest riser at the tight end position this week was Elijah Arroyo out of Miami. Arroyo dominated the one-on-ones. He's a big body guy who could box out DBs and linebackers pretty easily. He caught a contested catch on like a 2-point conversion try during the game to open up on like the very first drive. It was basically what he was doing all week. I was very impressed with his movement skills from his size. Very impressed with him overall. So Arroyo, I think, made himself a lot of money this week. In terms of the other tight ends, I'm looking through them now. I think Jaxson Hawes had a few good days, few good moments in my opinion. CJ Dupree was someone that I think a lot of people liked, but I think still needs some work as a blocker. And I think that was mainly the big names. So that was the tight ends. Now we get to the trenches, and I'm going to spend a good amount of time on the trenches here because this is where things are this is like the highlight of the Senior Bowl. The O-line, D-line drills, the battle in the trenches between all these guys. There's a lot of big names, in this draft class on the O-line and the D-line. And I mean, a lot of them went to the Senior Bowl. So we'll start with the offensive line, highlighted by guys like Emory Jones, Jonas Havanea, Wyatt Milam, Arianti Ursary, Josh Connolly, a lot of these big school guys. And I will say I wasn't entirely impressed with a lot of these big school guys. A lot of these big school guys that maybe were kind of borderline first round guys who bounce between being a tackle or a guard and maybe probably more project out to be a guard like a Wyatt Milam or an Emory Jones. Both of those guys play tackle but are probably going to be guards in the NFL. They were okay, but it was really the small school guys that stood out to me. Gray Zabel won the award for the best practice player of the week. That was an award voted on by all 32 team scouts throughout the week. And Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State University was, in my opinion, the best player throughout the week. He not only played in all three practices, pardon me, but he also played in the game as well. And a guy like Zabel, who could have called it after the first 2 days, and I mean, he had two very good days that probably pushed him into the high end of round 2, or maybe even onto night 1. But Zabel comes back and he not only stays for day 3 of practice and the game, but he delivers in both of them as well. I thought Zabel had a great week this week. Zabel is someone that I would maybe even eye for Washington at some point. I don't know if Washington will be in position, but maybe a trade down from round 1 to round 2 or something like that. I think he's going to be in that range for Washington to make a selection. And again, he was going up against a question for him was, can he do it against these Power 5 pass rushers, these massive pass rushers on the defensive line that came to Mobile? As a FCS guy, he started all 16 games for the Bison, but he was not playing against FBS competition, but he still delivered against these Power 5 guys. These guys are 6'6", 6'7" defensive linemen, defensive tackles going up against a guy like Gray Zabel, and Zabel dominated the O-line, D-line drills throughout the week. So I was very impressed with Zabel. Another guy I was impressed with was Anthony Belton out of NC State. I thought Belton, he played tackle throughout the entire week. I thought he had a pretty good week, especially early on against some of the top pass rushers, edge rushers at the Senior Bowl. So Anthony Belton out of NC State, he's got good size to be a tackle in the National Football League as well. So that is someone that I'm going to be watching and keeping an eye on, someone who's on my board now because of this week. In terms of some other ones, Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon. He had a pretty embarrassing moment when he got blasted by Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall, on day 3, on day 2, sorry. On day 2. But, what was it? Joe Connerly still won the award for best offensive lineman for the national team, voted on by his peers. So Connerly was someone that, he had a pretty good week in my opinion, but it was up and down. It was up and down for Connerly, but it also shows that one play doesn't show the entire story. You may see that Mike Green play that went viral or whatever, but that doesn't show everything for Josh Connerly, who not only played at left tackle, but also got a lot of time at right tackle as well. So something to note there. And then for some of the other guys, some other ones I was impressed with, Miles Frazier out of LSU. Frazier is someone who maybe projects to be a guard in the league, but maybe a developmental tackle. I could see him as a developmental tackle, a swing tackle maybe, but I was very impressed with Frazier in the pass protection. He was actually the American team's, the national team's, is it the American? I believe it's, the American team's best offensive lineman throughout the practice week as well. So I was very impressed with Miles Frazier out of LSU, especially with a guy like Emory Jones, who kind of was the big LSU guy on the offensive line, but Miles Frazier delivered in his own right. I thought he had a better week than Emory Jones. And then someone I want to bring up, Willie Lampkin. If you were listening to Tuesday's pod, I brought up Willie Lampkin, 5'10", 270 pounds, out of UNC. Lampkin is someone that I don't know if his future will be at center or if he'll be more of a fullback role. I asked him about it. He said he's open to playing whatever. And since he dropped 20 pounds, he was listed at 290 pounds on the UNC website, and he measured in at 270 here at the Senior Bowl. Since he dropped 20 pounds, I'm assuming he's thinking more of a fullbacky role and more of a sixth lineman role rather than a guy who plays center or guard in the league, which I think could be beneficial for him, especially because he would be the second smallest offensive lineman to ever play or to ever measure in, I believe, at the Combine. So it's going to be pretty crazy to see his measurables at the Combine, but Lampkin is someone that I think could definitely have a role in the NFL in a non-traditional offensive lineman way. So I don't know if his future will be at center, which he had some good reps when he was at center, going up against some of the bigger defensive linemen, but I think it's probably going to be more as a fullback in the league. But it was fun to watch him do stuff and watch him go up against some of these bigger Power 5 guys and win, which you love to see it for the little guys. So, as far as the defensive side, I think that was all the offense. Yeah, that was pretty much all the offense. But let's flip to the defensive side. We'll start with the defensive line because we're talking about the trenches here. I'm going to go Darius Alexander is my first guy. Out of Toledo, I had Alexander as a third round prospect. I would take him in the third round heading into this week. He is moving up on my boards after this week because Alexander's ability not only to go up against some of the top talent. Again, he was at Toledo and he was dominating the MAC, but going up against some of these top offensive linemen from bigger schools and dominating some of these bigger guys, some of these stronger guys, and he was dominating throughout the entire week. Alexander, his pass rushing skills, his ability to just push linemen backwards was awesome to watch, and I think Alexander could definitely be a guy who ends up going in the second round in this draft. Another guy, pretty much all of the Ole Miss guys, Walter Nolen, the defensive tackle, Princely Umanmielen, the edge rusher, and Jared Ivey, the edge rusher. All of them, I think, had very good weeks. Nolen left after the practices, and then after 2 practices, I believe, or maybe it was after all 3. I think it was all 3. But he did not play in the game, and then Umanmielen played in the game, and Jared Ivey did not. So I think all 3 of those guys had great weeks. You can say the same for Mike Green. I've got to talk about Mike Green, okay? It's the guy. If you're watching the video version, you can see Mike Green in the corner. That's my guy on defensive side. I talked with him after the very first practice, and luckily I talked with him then because he left after 2 days because what a dominant week he had. Mike Green out of Marshall is a smaller edge rusher. I believe he's 6'2", 250 pounds, which he measured in more than I thought he would, which was impressive. But still, he's going to be on the smaller side for a pass rusher. I was worried if he was going to get moved around too easily, but his speed, his pass rush plan, his bend, way too much. And also his strength as well, too much for any offensive lineman. Mike Green was the best pass rusher at the Senior Bowl this season, and I'm excited to see where he goes. I think Mike Green pushed himself. He was an option for Washington, I would say, before the Senior Bowl, late in the first round. But after this Senior Bowl performance, I think Mike Green easily goes in the top 20, potentially even number 8 to the Panthers is, I think, where I see him going the earliest. So very impressed with what Mike Green showed throughout this week. And I know it was only 2 days, but a cool guy as well. He's from Virginia too, so great stuff. He went to UVA before transferring over to Marshall in West Virginia. So great guy. Love to see it. But I think Mike Green, best edge rusher I saw out there for sure. Looking at some of these other guys, Baron Sorrell out of Texas, the defensive tackle / edge rusher. He had a very good week. Peebles out of Virginia Tech also had a good week, in my opinion. A lot of these guys. R.J. Oben out of Notre Dame. The talent, the most amount of talent in this class is on the defensive line, and it really showed. The defensive line class was as advertised here at the Senior Bowl. It was fun to watch. They were dominating the O-line, and this was not like a bad offensive line class for the Senior Bowl either. This was a lot of the top talent from some big schools, some small schools, and some of these guys were just getting destroyed by these defensive linemen, and a drill where I know the defensive linemen are supposed to win, but it was very impressive. It was very impressive what I saw from a lot of these guys, and some of the names that weren't even on my radar, like a guy like R.J. Oben, and some of these other ones. So I was very impressed by overall what we saw from this defensive line, and I'm happy because Washington needs defensive linemen, and more specifically, they need some edge rushers. There's a lot of good edge rushers in this class, and I'm looking forward to Washington potentially selecting one in the first couple of rounds. Let's move over up a level to the linebacker position. A lot of good linebackers have showed out throughout this week. I'm talking Demetrius Knight out of South Carolina was very athletic. I was very impressed with him. Jack Kaiser out of Notre Dame had 2 interceptions, one on Wednesday and one on Thursday. Great stuff from Jack Kaiser out of Notre Dame. Shemar James out of Florida in coverage, I was very impressed with. He had a couple reps against Trevor Etienne that I thought he just ran the route for him. He's got his eyes on the quarterback. He reads stuff well. I was very impressed with Shemar James. And then for the national team, if my mouse works. All right, for the national team, looking at guys like Jeffrey Bassa out of Oregon. I thought he had a great week, and that was kind of the main guy on the national team. But it's really the American team that kind of showed out. A few other edge rushers I want to talk about, actually. I forgot about a couple edge rushers, so we'll talk about that. But David Walker out of Central Arkansas. Walker, very, very tiny pass rusher, very tiny pass rusher. But I think Walker is someone who could have a rotational role in the league. And what we saw not only from him during the practices but during the game as well was very impressive. And then Femi Oladijo out of UCLA was someone who has only been playing the edge rusher position for 11 games. He kind of transitioned from an off-ball linebacker to playing edge rusher about halfway through the season for UCLA. And I know Josh Taylor, I saw him ask Oladijo about this. And he's like, yeah, I mean, I'm just learning the position still. And what he can do when he's just learning the position is awesome. So he'd be more of a developmental pass rusher that probably wouldn't be, in my opinion, active on the first kind of half of his rookie season on game days, but someone who can transition to be an edge rusher, a very productive edge rusher as well. So those were a couple guys that stood out to me. And then Landon Jaxson of Arkansas as well. Jaxson, very, very big guy. So very impressed with him. So yeah, so those were pretty much the front seven. Let's go to the DBs now. A few DBs that stood out to me. We'll start with the American team. Mac McWilliams out of UCF was someone that stood out to me a ton. I don't think he lost a one-on-one rep. Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky, I think was one of the best cornerbacks in the entire Senior Bowl. Stout did not participate in the Senior Bowl game itself because, I mean, he won the award for best practice player throughout the week. It was awesome what we saw from him. And then safety-wise, Caleb Ransaw out of Tulane. I thought Ransaw had a very good Senior Bowl game itself, especially in that first half. He had a couple of great run stops, plus he had an interception as well. And then on the national side, American side, some guys that dropped out, but also were pretty good. Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky was someone that I think impressed me a ton, but he dropped out after the first couple of days. And Trey Amos out of Ole Miss dropped out after the first couple of days as well. But Amos had a very good week, in my opinion. He's just so smooth, running just simple individual drills, but just so smooth what he's able to do. So those guys stood out to me. Quincy Riley out of Louisville was someone that I thought was the best cornerback on the national defense. Riley was someone who, I mean, very active with his hands, physical. He was great in one-on-one drills. Very impressed with him. I got a chance to talk with him too. Cool guy. So that was someone that stood out to me. Sebastian Castro out of Iowa. I felt like, he's a safety. I felt like he was kind of under the radar throughout the week, but he was like consistently good. He was winning his one-on-one reps against these running backs and against these tight ends. His ball skills are great. His timing is great when the ball arrives. I loved what I saw from him. So those were a few guys in the secondary that kind of stood out to me. And then I got to talk about Azareye'h Thomas. Azareye'h Thomas out of FSU. I got a chance to talk with him for like 5-10 minutes. It was awesome. Got to talk about his plan as a press man corner. He is someone that I would eye for Washington, maybe in the second round if he falls. I don't know if Thomas, I have a first-round grade on him. And again, I have very few first-round grades, and Thomas is one guy I have a first-round grade. But I think Thomas could fall in the second round. I think he didn't have that great. He was kind of an up-and-down Senior Bowl week for him, which may play into Washington's favor, because you look at what Washington wants to do, right? Play press man. You want to you got Marshawn Lattimore, so he can play man coverage. If you bring in a guy like Thomas to develop, he could play man coverage for you as well, and maybe eventually be Lattimore's replacement. But I think Washington needs a cornerback, and I guess we can transition this into the good fits for the Commanders as well. But I think Azareye'h Thomas could be someone Washington targets, potentially even in the first round. I would love drafting a corner like him. He's right now my cornerback one in this draft. So I'm a huge Azareye'h Thomas fan. Some other guys that Washington will be in position to grab. Shemar Stewart had a very good week, the edge rusher out of Texas A&M, pardon me. And even though Nick Squerton didn't go to the Senior Bowl, I think Stewart pushed himself into being the edge 2 or edge 3 in this class. I don't know if Stewart was someone that I think Washington could grab with the 29th overall pick, but not sure if he'll be in Washington's range now after a Senior Bowl like this. But some guys that are in Washington's range that I could see them picking, a guy like Jack Sawyer, he didn't go to the Senior Bowl, but out of Ohio State, a 4-year starter. I'm really looking at these 4-year starters because I think that's something that Adam Peters really values. And you look at a guy like Mike Sainristil, right? who played all 4 years and was kind of like a leader for that Michigan defense. I'm looking for leaders, and I mean, some of these guys I think could definitely be in the range for the Washington Commanders. If we're going offensive line in the first round, I think a guy like Josh Connolly out of Oregon. I know he's only 3 years, but someone that I could keep an eye on there. Or Wyatt Milam out of West Virginia. Well, I think it would be a little bit of a reach, but Washington could draft him. I'd keep an eye on Josiah Stewart on day 2. Josiah Stewart out of Michigan, an edge rusher, speedy edge rusher. He reminds me so much of why Washington fell in love with Mikey Sanders still. I think Josiah Stewart could be Washington's selection. You know what? I'm very confident right now. I'm maybe we come back to this clip. I'm just going to say it right now. I am very confident that the Washington Commanders draft Josiah Stewart at some point in this draft. If he is available with their second round pick, I am confident that they're going to draft him. Washington needs an edge rusher very badly, and Stewart's not only a good pass rusher, but he is a great run stopper. And that is something that Washington really lacked last season among their edges. I know a lot of people want to blame the defensive tackles for the worst run defense in the league last season, but really it was just the edge rushers. They couldn't set the edge. They struggled defending the runs. I know it's hard to defend the run when you're going up against like guys like Saquon or whatever, but we need better run stoppers on the outside, and Josiah Stewart is that guy. A 4-year player, 2 at Coastal Carolina, 2 at Michigan. I think Josiah Stewart will be a Washington Commander. I am out of any player at the Senior Bowl or really just in this draft class that I am the most confident in being a Washington Commander. It is Josiah Stewart right now. I think he reminds me so much of why, maybe it's because they both went to Michigan or whatever, but he reminds me so much of why they wanted to draft Mikey Sanders still. Stewart's a leader. I believe he was a team captain as well. A great guy. So, I mean, it is awesome to see what Stewart's been able to do. And I think Washington could get him in the second round as well. So those are some fits for the Washington Commanders. But let's wrap this thing up here, almost going 40 minutes. It is the offseason now for Washington. All right. Washington lost in the NFC Championship game. I didn't bring it up until now, but we all know, we all saw the game. It is the offseason now for the Washington Commanders. That means this pod is going back to new episodes every Monday. All right. Every Monday, we're going to be bringing you I'm going to be bringing you a ton of NFL draft content. We've got some great draft analysts joining the show over the course of the next 3 months, leading you up to not only Washington's free agency in March, but also the NFL draft in April, wrapping up this season of Keeping Up with Commanders. So I am super excited. We've got a lot of draft content coming, a lot of stuff from the Senior Bowl. If you want to see interviews and all that, I might put something together and create a video here on the channel with all these interviews that I did with draft prospects. But it was a lot of fun going to Mobile this week and seeing all these guys. Always is. Every year is my second year there, so it was a lot of fun, and looking forward to this draft season because this is a huge season, huge off season for the Washington Commanders. About $90 million in usable cap space. Washington, I feel like they're going to be moving around in the draft. They've got 7 picks, all right, but no 4th round pick, I believe, and instead 2 7s or something like that. So it's going to be a pretty active offseason for Adam Peters. You know, Adam Peters likes to be aggressive. We saw it so far as the GM, but year 2 with Adam Peters at the helm, this is going to be a fun offseason. So that'll wrap things up here on Keeping Up with the Commanders. Thank you all for watching or listening to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kenahan. See you guys in the next one. Peace.